The most mysterious, dangerous, and interesting islands. Part 1. Welcome, brave adventurers, to a spine-chilling journey across the globe's most enigmatic and treacherous islands. Pack your bags with courage, curiosity, and maybe a spare pair of underwear, because these destinations are not for the faint of heart. From eerie abandoned prisons to venomous snake-infested paradises, prepare to have your mind boggled and your nerves rattled. First stop, North Brother Island, New York. Have you ever heard the story of North Brother Island, a place where people with contagious diseases were quarantined for an entire century and where over 1,000 people died in a shipwreck in 1904? The island is still feared and avoided by locals today because of the chilling stories that have taken place there. North Brother Island is a 12-acre landmass located on the East River, just a few miles from the bustling heart of Manhattan, New York. This mysterious island remains a forgotten place, cloaked in moss and ruins, bearing the scars of a dark and eerie past as well as the tragic memories of its former inhabitants. Riverside Hospital's relocation led to the first public recognition of North Brother Island on the map. The hospital's purpose was to treat and isolate individuals suffering from contagious diseases. The island's first residents were victims of smallpox, tuberculosis, yellow fever, and typhus. The most famous resident of the island, of course, was Mary Mallon, also known as Typhoid Mary. Mary was the first documented asymptomatic carrier of the typhoid fever bacteria in the United States. This woman, believed to have infected over 50 people, 3 of whom died, consistently denied being the primary carrier. Nevertheless, she was confined to the island for the next 3 decades, until the end of her life. Although she spent her final days believing she was innocent, the truth revealed that her delicious desserts had indeed transmitted the disease to others, indirectly causing their deaths. Mary's transmission of typhoid fever originated from her work as a cook. During her culinary activities, Mary is believed to have spread typhoid fever while cooking for 53 people. She was prohibited from cooking and urged to seek medical attention, but Typhoid Mary ignored all warnings. Convinced she was being falsely accused, she even refused to provide urine and stool samples for scientific analysis, claiming she was completely free of the disease. After being quarantined twice at a local hospital, Mary was forbidden from cooking but broke her promise and continued her culinary passion under a different name. This time, she was apprehended and permanently isolated on North Brother Island until her death. Even after being quarantined on the island, Mary Mallon could not conceal her defiant attitude. She always maintained her belief in her health and innocence, with her eyes filled with bitter resentment. Another tragic event in the island's history was the General Slocum disaster, which occurred on June 15, 1904, and claimed the lives of 1,141 people, mostly German immigrants from the Lower East Side, on their way to a Sunday picnic on Long Island. Legend has it that the overcrowded steamboat caught fire when a careless sailor lit a cigarette near a closet full of cotton fabric. The boat, engulfed in flames, attempted to reach North Brother Island. Patients and doctors on the island rushed out of the hospital to try and rescue hundreds of passengers who had jumped from the burning ship. However, only 407 people survived, including a 1-year-old baby. After World War II, the island became home to American veterans and their families. However, due to the harsh living conditions and inconvenient transportation to the mainland, these families gradually abandoned the island. In 1950, the U.S. government turned North Brother into a rehabilitation center for American teenagers but quickly closed it down after 10 years of operation because of its dark sides. When everyone left in 1963, New York took over the island, and it returned to its desolate state, devoid of human presence. It contains the ruins of a lost world and many sorrowful memories, including Mary Mallon, the disease carrier, and the shipwreck that claimed over 1,000 lives in 1904 near the island. Furthermore, the lack of strict management turned it into a haven for robbers and vandals. To this day, the city has not determined whether or not to allow people to live on the island again, and if so, how. North Brother Island may never reopen to the public, as, according to predictions of extreme climate change, it could be completely submerged by 2100. North Brother Island is now a desolate and lonely place, bearing traces of the souls of the patients who once lived there. Next up, Poveglia, Italy. A Venetian lagoon off the coast of northern Italy has a small island called Poveglia at its center. In ancient times, this place was also called Papilia. Located between Venice and Lido Island, it covers an area of about 68,000 square meters and consists of 3 islands. 2 of the 3 islands are naturally formed, with one completely covered in vegetation and the other mainly consisting of buildings. The 3rd island is an artificial octagonal island created from wooden piles and layers of soil. According to records, Poveglia welcomed its first inhabitants in 421 Common Era, people fleeing war. Because the island was so small, conquering it wasn't worth the invaders' time and resources. Therefore, the people here always lived in peace and isolation. By the 9th century Common Era, the island's population had reached its peak and gradually became a haven for tax evaders. In the 1379 Common Era, war broke out again, and this time, the island was affected, forcing the residents to relocate and leaving it abandoned. From 1645 onwards, Poveglia was transformed into a military outpost, boasting an octagonal fort and naval artillery. But before it became an important military asset, this tiny island had another, terrible purpose. In the Middle Ages, many cities suffered from the bubonic plague. This infamous disease did not bypass the city of Venice, which in fact is thought to have suffered from 69 instances of this disease between the 14th and 18th centuries. The first epidemic occurred in 1348. Over the next 6 months, this disease practically wiped out almost half of Venice's population. By the time the plague came around again in 1423, the Venetians were more aware of what to do and how to deal with this disease. They founded the Lazaretto State Hospital. In 1468, another hospital was established, New Lazaretto. In 1576, the plague returned to Venice, and a decision was made to isolate the infected from the healthy. Outside the city, burial grounds were created for those who had succumbed to the disease. However, soon they were overwhelmed. As a result, both the deceased and those infected were sent to the island of Poveglia. This happened again with the next bout of plague in the 1630s. In 1776, Poveglia Island was handed over to the Public Health Office for management and became a checkpoint for ships entering and leaving Venice. In 1793, several cases of plague were discovered on 2 ships being inspected, and the island officially became a plague quarantine site from then on. The precise number of people who perished at Poveglia will never be known, but estimates put it between 100,000 and 160,000 people. As the plague claimed more victims, several ovens were installed on the island to burn the remains. In the 21st century, the soil of the island was analyzed, and the results showed that up to 50% of a sample consisted of the organic remains of people. Eventually, with better healthcare, the island of Poveglia became empty as the need for a checkpoint disappeared. However, the island's association with seriously ill patients is not done yet. In 1922, works were undertaken on the island, and a sanatorium was built to house those with mental disorders. But like many asylums at the time, this institution was more a place to exile the mentally ill than to help them. Poveglia was, once again, a desolate home for anyone whom society felt was a burden. There are rumors that one of the surgeons who worked at the asylum in the 1930s conducted experiments on his patients. There is no documentation left to confirm whether this is true, but many claimed to be able to hear the screams of his victims from across the lagoon. Many patients began to report hearing voices and seeing shadows on the island. The medical staff did not believe them, seeing it as just another level of their lunacy. But if the rumors are to be believed, the ghosts were responsible for bringing the sadistic doctor's experiments to an end. It is reported that he also claimed to hear voices and feel something unseen brushing against him. By 1967, he was so scared that he raced up to the top of the bell tower to escape these ghosts, and when he reached the top, he either jumped or was pushed. In 1968, the hospital was closed and abandoned. The island was empty, and nature began to reclaim the buildings. Many locals insist they can still hear the bell in the tower ringing some nights, even though the bell has long since been removed. Everyone is afraid to venture too close to the island. Even fishermen stay away, fearful that they might catch something other than fish and plants in their nets. In 2014, the Italian government was faced with the need to raise revenue, so it was decided to lease off some historical sites, including Poveglia. The island would remain owned by the state, but an online auction offered a 99-year lease. The government hoped to achieve €10 million for this lease. However, the highest bid was from an Italian businessman named Luigi Brunaro, who offered €513,000. He wanted to build a private clinic for eating disorders on the island. The lease wasn't granted to him. Some claim it's because he didn't meet the necessary conditions, others because the government deemed his bid too low and wanted to hold out for a higher price. However, a British newspaper reported that Brunaro's bid was actually frustrated by the non-profit organisation Poveglia per Tutti, which means Poveglia for all. Poveglia per Tutti had raised €444,000 in an effort to buy the island themselves. They wanted to turn it into a place for the community to enjoy, as many residents feel that Venice is overwhelmed by tourists. When they were outbid by Brunaro, they refused to increase their bid. Consequently, the businessman was stuck with his initial, low, and unacceptable offer since he had no one else to bid against. The fate of the island remains unknown. Structures such as a hospital, church, shelter, the bell tower, and some administrative buildings have survived on the island. But those places are in ruins, and any artifacts inside them are covered with rust. The fort now consists only of an earthen rampart, lined with brick outside. Currently, the island of Poveglia is closed to visitors. In the past, this has made it a very attractive gathering place for local youths. Visiting the island is illegal, but that hasn't stopped journalists and tourists from trying to get onto it. In June 2014, 2 Australian journalists spent the night there. Although they stated that they saw no ghosts, they did have an unsettling experience. When they woke up in the morning, they found that a hospital steel table that had been on the far right of the room was on the far left. They'd photographed the table in its original position, so they knew they were not imagining it. Another website reported how 5 people from Colorado tried to spend the night on Poveglia in 2016, but they ended up being picked up by the authorities after a passing sailboat heard their screams. How are you feeling after these stories? Still want to explore Poveglia? Help me pack one more pair of underwear because I don't have any anymore. Thank. So this concludes the first part of the video. Remember to subscribe to the channel and click the notification to watch the next episode. Forget it. If you come across a good video, remember to like and share it so that your friends can watch it, or be scared with you. See you.